Hello everyone and welcome to part 4 with myself, Alison. I'm an astrologer, and with me is Katrina Matisse, who is a human design expert really and also a Gene Keys ambassador. So we're going to be weaving astrology, gene keys, human design through this and creating a synthesis and using all three of those to really get a fuller picture. And we're continuing our topic today of understanding the changes that are going to happen leading up until 2027. And a really good way to do this is to look at what's going on with the outer planets, because they are markers of big collective global changes, whereas the inner planets are more to do with personal and individual. But what we're seeking to understand here is what is this picture going to look like in these very intense, stormy 6 years ahead, as the systems we're in now, we see around us are all crumbling, and new things are already starting to sprout up. And we're going to bring in the goddess asteroids into our conversation, who are really seeding new consciousness and new archetypes for humanity. And they are rulers of this journey between the personal and the transpersonal. So we've got lots there, but we're going to try and keep it as simple as possible. So I'm going to begin today. I'm going to just share screen of the new moon yesterday. Oh, hang on a minute. I've forgotten to open it first. I'll have to do that. Hang on, everyone. Right, here we go. Okay. Right, let me share this now. Okay, so this was a very, very powerful new moon yesterday. It took place on this, the sun and the moon were in Gene Key 7, line 4, and the earth in 13. So this is an axis we've discussed quite a lot in the cross of the Sphinx in our previous podcasts. And you know, there's a lot of tension actually in this chart, but there's also a lot of harmony. So this is what struck me when I looked at it. If I just get my little pen up here, is you can see this beautiful triangle here, kind of evolutionary triangle pointing upwards. And then we have another beautiful triangle pointing downwards here. So in the Bodygraph, this is connecting the G center and the Ajna center. And in our previous podcasts as well, we've been talking a lot about the G center and the connection of the cycle of nature, the seasons, and the wheel. So let's have a look here at 61 right at the top, because this is where Pluto is at the moment. You can see Pluto says there, it's in the line 5 at the moment. And I'd like to just credit Kim Gold with knowing this, but earlier in the year, Uranus was in 24 here. So this 61, 24 Ajna center has been very active, which with these two powerful planets. So we've got Pluto, life, death, rebirth, the phoenix rising from the ashes. And we also have 24, which is about breaking those patterns of addiction, the mind kind of going in its loops. And Uranus is all about doing something different and breaking free. So this is what's been going on earlier in the year. And then very recently, we've got Uranus moving into gate 2 here, which is the yin-yin gate. And so this kind of goddess yin energy, again, Uranus is going to help us break free from old conditioning. And I'm just wondering what you think about this, Katrini, but I've been really kind of feeling into the big change that's going to come from the cross of planning to the cross of the sleeping phoenix. And it feels like Uranus in Gene Key 2 could be preparing us for that, you know, because it feels like Gene Key 2 is this very yin, you know, I'm imagining the sleeping phoenix as this very yin energy. And so I just wanted to kind of invite you in at that point and see your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Alison.
So far.
What?
Said on anything I've said so far.
Yeah.
Uranus in 2.
I like this shapes you've noticed, really like this oppression and looking for answers and psychosis that kind of all there kind of as a pattern. And it's important to know that we look at this chart because it's a new moon, so it kind of highlights like a portal something. So of course the 4 will move soon because it's Mercury. And yeah, I mean, for me, I have notes in my design 7 and 13 in the 4th line, so I'm really familiar with those thematics of them. And the key word, for example, for the 13 is burnout, because it takes in all the secrets. It's kind of the 13 is this spider that sits on the cosmic web and then hears and like is empathic with everything. So it takes in lots of stuff like a black hole, and sooner or later it burns out. So the original 4th line burnout takes origin from this gate. And for me, it speaks of not so much of something like that we are tired of what's going on and there is acknowledgement of that state, but it's about those positions are about leadership in a certain way. It's kind of an alpha, the direction into the future, the 7th gate, logical and direction from the past of the 13th. And in the 4th line, those leadership are being transformed. Those are about things that, okay, I'm not gonna lead those who don't follow me. So we are kind of leaving those patterns, whether those people or practices we do that we don't want to kind of invest in or are kind of tired, or those things are really kind of tired of us, of our leadership. So there is kind of a separation and like letting go that happened during this new moon in Leo. So that stands out for me. And yeah, the second one, Uranus, so it's unusualness, right? So there is this unusualness of being in the body, because second line is the form, is about receptivity. It's kind of unusual way of how we become receptive. And also it's mutative, same as 61st gate where Pluto is. So there is a mutation that is brought by the 61 and by the 2 in Pluto and Uranus. this pulse of mutation. And then in this new moon, we have this collective gate 7 and 13 that kind of redirect us while this mutation is going on, while we realize that patterns within our head and within our body doesn't serve us anymore. We're like burned out by those patterns. We want to be leaders for ourselves. This is actually what 7 and 13 is about, is being embodied, deeply embodied, rather than initiating and manifesting things. It's about being recognized and recognize correct things for us. So I would sum up it like that. I have something to say more about astrology, but maybe we will put it back and forth. So thank you.
Right, there we go. Unmute. Yeah, that's really fascinating as well, because you know, the UN this morning released the international report on global warming, and we know that part of this mutation is going to come from the intense pressures of our world as it heats up, and the fires that are going, and really have been going since, you know, the year before the pandemic. There's been these massive fires globally. Nobody's escaping this, you know. So yeah, so that is also about kind of leadership, because it's interesting that what they were saying on the radio in Britain today was that every time they've done this report, they really kind of pussyfooting around, you know, maybe we should do something now or maybe not. And this time they've been like, right, the human beings are definitely involved in why the planet's heating up, and we're in it now. You know, it's not something in the future, it is happening right now. So yeah, that all speaks to me of this kind of need for leadership, I guess, and for a clear direction forward. I'm not necessarily looking to the UN for that, but I think we need to find that in our own authority. And this is what I feel Uranus in Gene Key 2, is asking us to, it feels like it's about body wisdom and the somatic body, and where we kind of finished on our last podcast was this kind of really, I felt the key essence of that is we need to be in our body wisdom in this time and not trying to understand and change things from the mental plane, because it's not going to work, basically. Okay, so just to mention the other outer planets and what they're doing here, and then we're gonna what I'm gonna do is take us through what Pluto's doing. We can't do all of them in one go, but what Pluto is a major one in kind of the transmutation energy, the life death breakdown of systems and biological forms and all of that. Okay, so recently as well, kind of around the same time Uranus moved into Gene Key 2, we also had Neptune move from 22 into 36. So the key words around 36 are compassion, but the shadow of that is turbulence. So Neptune is really calling us into understanding, I feel, what compassion is. And I just wrote a blog yesterday for the new moon, and what I was talking about, what was sort of speaking to me, is that compassion is something really, a lot of us don't understand what compassion is. we tend to see it as being nice to people. And even when people are being really badly behaved or doing stuff to us, we just carry on being nice because we think that's what compassion is. But actually, sometimes compassion is about saying no. It's about putting down boundaries. It's about not allowing people to continue with their addictive patterns of behavior, and kind of you codependently being part of that, or me, or whoever. So it feels like we're being called to a deeper level of understanding compassion. And Pallas Athena's traveling actually with Neptune at the moment. In Pisces, she is the Bhodisattva. But the Bodhisattva, this is my feeling, isn't about being all kind of nicey tea and biscuits. You know, it's actually a really edgy energy, that Bodhisattva, and being truly compassionate can sometimes mean being quite hard-nosed. So that's just my feeling about it, and see what Katrini thinks in a bit. So we've also got Saturn here is in Gene Key 19, and that's in Aquarius, and is actually at the moment in a square to Uranus astrologically. So when we have Uranus about breaking free, the future of humanity, forward thinking, and then we have Saturn that represents the past, the systems, tradition. So we have this real kind of tension between the past and tradition and the future. You know, this is a time which kind of echoes what Katrini said about 7 and 13, that we're leaving behind old patterns. And this new moon is super special as well, because the 8th of August every year is what's called the end of the Lion's Gate, and it's the rising of Sirius, super important star. So yeah, it feels like, boom, this like dividing line somehow has arrived yesterday. So so we have again Saturn there. The shadow of 19 is codependency, and moving into sensitivity, and this is a huge theme, I feel, for what's happening to us as humans through this process I've kind of been watching, since 2017, especially with the seeding of the Holy Grail seeds, as I called them. I think it was our first podcast, we talked about that. But the sensitizing of human beings, which basically means feeling more, allowing ourselves to feel, and we're kind of emerging from this numb state that many of us have been in. And that's hard, because there might be a lot of grief, anger, because the numbness has been a protection, but now it's kind of like a big melt happening, and we're feeling more and more. Okay, so yeah, I won't say more on that at the moment. And then we have Jupiter here, has been traveling in Gene Key 55 for a while, which is all about freedom, and has now moved into 30, which maybe Katrini can say more about 30. It's not one I'm particularly familiar with. But yeah, this is a Pisces key where Jupiter is in Pisces at the moment. Yes, so that's a kind of summary of where we're at right now with the outer planet. So I'm going to invite you in again, Katrini, just to kind of give your thoughts on the other planets.
Thank you, Alison. Maybe I could share screen as well. Let's see. Yeah, I like this notion of melting, and I will have like a double chart. So I've just put some astrological wheel, and here we will just have the gates of the same new moon transit. Yeah, the 36th, the Neptune, it's also called crisis and dark night of the soul. And this is where we recently dived into, and it's very, very deep. And it's melting not only in the mutation together with dwarf planet Sedna, which melts the ice. And basically the program melts the ice. And it's the program that starts the mutation. Excuse me. So it's not our fault, but the program was doing it through us. So the mutation could happen because it happens only when it's heating process. And what's for me interesting is that Neptune gonna be there until 2024. And it's like now until 2024, we are not even aware of what kind of crisis we are going into. So we're kind of in the waters, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then we're gonna go out of that crisis. But in the middle, it would really feel like turbulence and all the emotional things popping up individually, but on the collective level. And so we're meeting our crisis, cultural, economical, individual, and it also has to do with grief. Like all the outer planets are kind of squeezing us, facing us. So we're feeling the grief, and we are learning how to handle it. We're learning how to handle our own trauma. We're learning how to handle it by ourselves, not with the help of someone. And yeah, just show quickly because that's 2024. Here it is. So we're gonna plunge out of that into the 25, into the universal love. So this is the transits of the outer planets 2024, and in 2023 there will be a retrograding. There will be moving from, we're gonna have a taste of universal love and then go again into crisis. So we're gonna be like deep into crisis, then plunge out for a little bit, then go again to revisit it finally, and then we're gonna be in the gate of universal love, in the vessel of love, in the grail, and that's very beautiful. We're gonna flow in that. And yeah, what I like to say here is like to talk about Jupiter a little bit and like what's going on in this new moon, but just as an example of what kind of tremendous change we're all in now. So Jupiter is this Aquarius thing that kind of changing the emerging patterns. And so it's kind of on the edge. I mean, it's still this Aquarius. So you say it's in Pisces, but
it's retrograded back, hasn't it?
Yes. Yes. So, and it's a funny move because Jupiter is this. It forms our worldview, and it forms our worldview in regard environment, and in regard memory, and in regard point of reference. So what's happening now when it's in Aquarius, and everything that we made sense regarding our viewpoints and environment is kind of shattering now, and our past experience are challenged together with the patterns, because they're chaotic Aquarius words. So landscape of our cultural kind of background, our own environment is transformed now. So this is happening here. And also Saturn is in Aquarius as well, and together with Neptune, Uranus, Neptune in Taurus, it's kind of it's reinforcing us to change in regards insecurity we're experiencing now, because Aquarius is all about chaos and insecurity. So there is this global reshaping in a high speed by this titans that is happening like on a collective level. And in particular to this new moon is interesting because Jupiter is like with Mercury, it's forms opposition with Mercury in Leo, and it's kind of Mercury is about deeper perception of reality and also kind of deeper self-understanding through words and like also beliefs that has been formed. And there is this together kind of Mercury causes shocks and asks us question that Jupiter in Aquarius forms, which is, what is that I believe is true, and how come those beliefs shaped my reality, like what influences me, and this being shattered. So we kind of go into the silent mode, we kind of internalize. This new moon made us internalize and kind of in a shock regarding our belief system that we've been like holding on to, that shaped our reality environment. And now we're kind of forced to ask ourselves questions. What are those beliefs? What are value of those beliefs? Like, we understand that our beliefs are not so certain anymore. There is something needs to be reconsidered. And this all comes with grief and insecurity and completely new reality we have to orient, and we can't orient there with our old belief structures, so to say. So, and also Mars here, it forms tension with the nodes. So it's kind of also puts tension into that conversation of what we live in the past and how we're heading towards the future, the nodes, and all these narratives and positions we've been taking. And like, yeah, it's how in this present moment, where do we move forward and how? So this kind of, a bit fluffy overview of that, but the overall thing is about what's happening in particular this new moon and like forward the changes is the theme of liberation. And liberation is a certain way of living and not feeling oppressed and like restricted, and kind of we want to liberate from these existing structures, pre-existing structures within internal and external. And we are kind of in the middle of this cauldron of change. And probably I will stop there, because further on I would like to talk about Pluto more, because this is the main game player in this whole gang of collective giants transforming and like putting us into uncertainty and insecurity and facing us with our own grief. That was it.
Okay, that's great. That's exciting. I mean, just that kind of how interesting that, as I hadn't thought of this, but as actually the ice is melting literally on the earth, there's some kind of process where our ice is melting as well. That it's like an invisible thing that's been keeping us quite numb, and we're coming out of that. So we're about to go into a really deep dive. If you imagine we're a submarine, we've been going down and we're about to go like that, because at the moment, all the planets and Chiron, all the outer planets, so Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune and Chiron are all retrograde. And on the 20th of August, Uranus joins them and goes retrograde. Now, as far as I'm aware, this is really unusual for every single outer planet to be retrograde. So when planets go retrograde, it means that they're covering old ground. You know, they're digging up things that have not yet been resolved. And so if you imagine all these planets, you know, it is going to literally be like a dive into having to face certain things, you know, depending on where we are, if we've already faced quite a lot. But these are collective things, you know, so things I was talking about, the environment, for example. A lot of people who've been saying, oh no, the planet's not heating up, are having to change their belief. I really liked what you were saying, Katrina, about how our belief systems actually give us a sense of security. And one of the really challenging things about this time ahead is our belief systems are going to be shattered. You know, they could be shattered in an instant, or it could be a slow kind of dissolve. And I think we can really see that happening in religion, for example, where people have a very strong belief that's holding them, and it could be a spiritual belief as well that you have, and then suddenly that's really challenged, and you know, you kind of maybe realize, oh wow, I've been spending the last 20 years in a kind of really dodgy belief system. And so, you know, that can send your entire world actually crashing in. It's like, could be like a huge loss of faith, or something along those lines. So from the 20th of August, we go into this deep dive, and that's going to last until the 7th of October is when Pluto comes direct. 18th of October, Jupiter goes direct, and then gradually they all start to kind of come out of that. And quite a few of them will actually go back into the previous gate or gene key. So if I can go, no, I won't go back to that actually, because I've shut it. But if you remember on the first body graph of the new moon, we were talking about the 6124. Yeah, there it is. So Uranus actually goes back into 24. So we have the second Ajna activation, if you like, where we're going to see the truth about certain things, and it could be really shattering, or it could be amazing. You know, it could be the thing that releases us. I mean, the thing is, if it'll only be false truths that fall apart, you know, so whatever way you look at it, we're going towards more freedom. So let me just, did I write down when that's going to happen? Okay, no, I didn't. If I did, I can't see it now. But anyway, we're going to have the second activation, and both planets are going to be retrograde, Pluto and Uranus. So it's going to be even more intense than what was happening at the beginning of the year. So you could think back to the beginning of the year, you know, what kind of revelations did you have then? And you might start to get kind of deeper levels of that. And And also remember, this 24 is about breaking addictions. So this is a really good time to address addiction patterns. Okay, so if you stop sharing that, and I'm going to share, where are we here? Share screen. So I'm going to go on to Pluto moving into gene key 60. So we move from Pluto being in 61. This is in the gene keys, the shadow of psychosis, gift of inspiration, Siddhi of sanctity, and then it's going to move into gene key 60, which falls kind of at the end of Capricorn and into the beginning of Aquarius. And the shadow is limitation. The gift is realism, and the Siddhi is divine justice. So I love this gene key, actually, and I got very much into it because at the winter solstice last year we had the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in gene key 60. That was actually at 0 degrees Aquarius. So that was another very powerful seeding at that point of, you could say what I felt of that is an Aquarian Christ consciousness, you know, the Christ consciousness that's for everyone, and not just for a few, if you like. So we have this move to 60 on this particular day, 14th of January 2022. What jumped out at me is it's a manifesting generator chart as well, and one of the kind of strange synchronicities between myself and Katrini is my partner was born in 1966, which is in Chinese astrology the year of the fire horse. So it's very feisty women are born in this year. And in ancient times, the emperor, actually, they used to be put to death, the girls, because they were thought to make such a big change in society. It's like, we'll just kill them off. But later on, they were taken on as warriors by a later emperor. So it's always fascinated me that. I have a lot of friends born in 1966. And you mentioned, Katrina, your mom's born in 1966 and is also a manifesting generator, because at that time the nodes, which if I go on my little pen here, you can see the nodes are gene key 20 and 34. So that's 20 and 34, making the manifesting generator channel, which is a very, that gene key 34 is actually what kind of brought us together. So if you're interested in gene key 34, which is very powerful, go back and watch our first podcast, which was about Siberia and gene key 34. Well, Russia, Siberia, whole thing. Yeah, which interestingly enough, I blog for a woman called Mahala, who's a world astrologer, and she's developed this map. And this part of the zodiac is actually over Siberia and Russia. Well, it's mid-Siberia, this part of the zodiac. So we may actually see manifesting in that area, and perhaps a sort of reignition of the origin of the shamanic culture that emanated through the world from there. So that's something we discuss in that podcast. So to put that succinctly, this time when Pluto moves has a real resonance with 1966. So if you were born in 1966, also if you were a manifesting generator, you know, this is going to be of particular powerful time for you in this time. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to say anything more about anything else there. That just kind of popped out at me, but I'll hand over to you, Katrini, to see if you want to add anything about this change from 61 to 60. Oh, before I do that though, I have forgotten something. Okay, so in December this year, before Pluto makes this move, he has a really kind of amazing dance with quite a lot of the goddess asteroids and Venus. So on Christmas Day this year is like the pinnacle of this dance. It's like, wow. So on that day we have Astraea, she's a golden age goddess. We have Pluto, we have Venus, we have Mercury, we have Juno, who's all about the alchemical sacred marriage, all in Capricorn in a stellium. And that's kind of going on through the whole of December. It reaches its kind of peak on Christmas Day when they're the closest together. And then Pluto makes this move. So it feels like this goddess energy really kind of infuses Pluto before this move takes place, which I think is kind of really fascinating. So I'll hand over on that note.
Yeah, I would share my pictures as well. We kind of next time we'll do one big sliding company. Well, yeah, I like what you've said, like this moving back and forth, like 61, 24 from two of the Neptunes, kind of, it seems like it's very gentle and very compassionate for those big planets, giants, kind of plunging us in, and then okay, we reconsider. It's like, and then we'll again go for a couple of years somewhere, and there is a retrograding, so there are periods of digesting going on, and like we go into the unknown reality, and then we have some breathe in where we can find inspiration and find innovation. That's basically two keys are about. And or we remember that the pandemic started when the Pluto entered 61st gate. So the pandemic was kind of staged by the Pluto, and the psychosis started, or inspiration started, and also innovation, or like this shadow states or this higher frequencies of those same keys. But it's nice to have a rest, because 2020 was too much in the head, and it's nice to have a rest in some other things. Yeah, so 61, and I want to say that we move, as you said, Alison, we were moving into the 60s gate, and we are moving there until again 2024. And this is important. I will show you the mandala here. So we imagine that Pluto moves here. This is kind of Capricorn thematics, 60, so 61, it moved to 60. Before it was in 54, we were all kind of this marrying maiden. We were all in this root energy of materializing things, and then it all collapsed in psychosis in the 61, and it's going to move into the 60, and it was already there in the retrograde periods where all the restrictions started to happen on the collective level, where all this governmental, cultural, like this, I call it sphincter. So it's like, totalitarian sphincters start to kind of choke the thing, and we can find it in a positive way, because we start to find our boundaries. 60 for me has a lot to do with the Earth, because this is a Codon Ring of Gaia, 60, 61, 19. So it has excuse me, it has a lot to do with the form, with the body, with the earth. So it's kind of on the outside, it looks like restriction and kind of together with destabilizing thing, manifested by Uranus, of course, and also Saturn, kind of destabilizing, but also restrictive. But also it's like was our chance to find our body, our form, so we are more aware of our own limitations, which is a positive thing, because we would need to know that towards 2027. And what happens next, and as you remember, I was showing that the Neptune is going to the 25, which is like we're going from this crisis into universal love, and 2024 is the year we're waiting now for, because the Pluto gonna move into the starting codon of the 41st gene key emanation. And this is the beginning of end, because 41 is this, in human design, it's a new year. We were talking about in the podcast, it's the only starting codon, it's methionine amino acid, so it's kind of start every genetic sentence. And what I really want to kind of leave a really simple note here is that this is not gates, numbers, and gene keys. This is codons. This is codons of our body, 64 codons that program amino acids. So it's not some kind of whatever somewhere there in the cosmos. We are the cosmos, and this is happening with our codons. We are it, and it is us. And that's important to understand when we go about this. Oh, this is gonna change. This is gonna trigger certain chemistry. It's not just some kind of back and forth with objects where we are objects and we bang into objects. It's a mutation that's kind of crack us up from within, and for everyone uniquely. And so this is an interesting moment of this 41, and it's beginning of end of the limitation and structures, but it's also how to say, the Pluto starts, it was going through all of the wheel, and each time Pluto goes and strokes the codon, it kind of switches off. And it means that we are the program towards 2027, this Godhead, this seven-centered homogenizing force is being switched off, and it's done not by the outer planets, Saturn, Jupiter, they're kind of big guys playing on the playground, but it's mama, grandma, Pluto that doing all the work of mutation. And when it hits 41, this is a fun place, because yeah, it's kind of been we've been through the Pluto cycle since 79 and until 2024. So from the beginning of mutation, it was starting 81 with the finding out of Uranus in the sky, the mutation of from 7th center to 9-7 beings who we are now started. And 2024, it will be the full Pluto cycle we go through. So there were all the generations where Pluto went through all of the gates, and now it's kind of hitting the last, stroking the last codons, and the 7th center is crushed, and the 9th center is kind of nowhere. It's neither 7th centered, neither it was able to be self-aware during this cycle, except few ones who know about the mechanics, and still it's kind of a small window. And what happens is the cycle finishes 2027, the cross of the planning, we're heading towards the cross of the sleeping point Phoenix, and it's the end game of Homo sapiens in transitus and Homo sapiens, because the program which was programming our survival, which was mutating us, is not going to support us anymore. And that's the thing of Pluto. And it's kind of God's turning their face away from us, because this is all quarters are Godheads. here we could see it's like all the certain clusters of amino acids which were presented by certain godheads named and so forth and so on. So Pluto goes through all of it, and now we're in the keepers of the wheel and heading towards Kali and sleeping phoenix. So yeah, like we are the holy grail, and we are in this mixing pot and like magical ball of creation and resource, and Pluto kind of mixes it and yeah, says, okay, the program very soon gonna let you go, and this train is fast and you cannot stop it. We cannot hold on to things anymore. They're like, it's very quick. And 2027, we all, on the 14th of February, in the St. Valentine's Day, we all wake up with a shock, because it's going to be the key of the 51st gene key, the initiating codon. So kind of what's going on now is the preparation, and it's a fast track, and it's a train moving forward. We cannot stop it. Like, we cannot stop global warming, and we don't have to. And everyone who is against global warming is kind of preventing actually the mutation. That's what we're here for. Yeah, so maybe I will show the chart what's 2027, what's interesting there. So yeah, we have Pluto in 41, and what else I wanted to say? Yeah, and maybe the last thing about Pluto is Pluto programs every generation for like at least 3 years. Like some people were born with Pluto in 26th gate, and when we hit 2027, they're gonna mature, so they're gonna influence. So there is still a lag because of Pluto programming. So it will let go us when in 2227, it's like the last person dies, and we kind of completely forget and cannot hold on to the frequencies that exist now, to this world that exists now. It will be gone. So Pluto is what we have to pay attention, like, and because it's showing us, say goodbye to this thing, say goodbye to restrictions, say goodbye to inner truth. 61st gate is of inner truth, and now before 2027 is exactly why we have all this knowledge available, because we have Pluto in 61. It opens all the occult knowledge, all the hermeneutic knowledge, whatever you want, gene keys, human design, all these practical systems, and their mechanics, they're open. And it's the last kind of chance of 6 years to take it, because when Pluto shifts into 60 and into 41, particularly into 41, it's all going to be like, it's all gone, maybe together with the internet and possibility to enter those resources. We don't know what's going to happen, but the 61 won't be available anymore, never. There would be people who were born with 61 Pluto, and they're going to hold this frequency, and we're going to tap into those people, because they're going to kind of hold the knowledge, hold this last pieces and books, libraries within them. But basically, this is it, like, take the knowledge, explore, mutate, heal. This is the time. And further on, no Pluto, no godheads, new reality. And by the way, making homage to the goddesses, so we stop being like, there are no more 9-centered solar system anymore, because we have discovered Sedna and Eris. So this is Pluto orbit, and this is Eris kind of orbit, and this is Sedna. So it's really, really like, this is the solar system. So it's really huge. And those two goddesses playing big role in the mutation and rave emerging in melting of the ice, Sedna, in the daughter of chaos, Eris, that are going to play its role also further on. And it's playing it now, as we see with all the women movements as well. This is Eris and Eris. Yeah, so I wanted to touch it because many in human design or gene keys are not aware of asteroids or dwarf planets, but they're here, and they're here with Pluto. And because Pluto is a major game player of the change, those are as well. I was very like a train, like a Pluto train myself. I will stop sharing here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say on the global warming thing that I also perceive that we can't stop global warming. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't learn to live lightly on the earth, because this is actually going to be part of our survival, is that we learn to attune and live in harmony with the earth. And that was all part of the mutation as well, that a kind of what Richard Rudd calls Homo Sanctus will emerge. I'm not sure, this is maybe something you could talk about, because I'm not as familiar with human design teachings on are the raves and Homo Sanctus the same being? Yeah, I thought so. So that being is an improvement on the Homo sapien, basically, but also maybe quite different as well. So as I say, Katrina could maybe say more on that, because I'm more familiar with Homo Sanctus, and I, at the same time as being fearful, because I don't think you can approach something like this as a human being really and not be a bit like, oh my God, you know, even when you're an astrologer and you can see the different things happening, it's still alarming from that kind of very human place, and yet there's some faith in me. There's a feeling in me that it's all going to be fine, but it's going to be very challenging as well. And the pandemic has been very challenging, but on a personal level, I've really thrived through it, and I know other people have. And so it's about learning to live in a way that's thriving, even as these old systems break down and crumble and there's chaos. We can return to this embodied inner authority, self-assured center, and use our intuition as guidance through these times. And this is what I feel really I got from our first podcast, is how important this G center is that connects with the cycle. So I'm going to leave that there, and you know, we were going to finish on the wheel again, go back to the wheel and talk about the southern hemisphere in relation to that. But so I'll just hand over to you, Katrina, to sum up anything on that bit you want to.
You said it beautifully, Alison. I kind of feel into it, because it's not about survival, it's about survival. But the survival energy going to be there while this thing is leaving us, while the program leaves us. And the only challenge is that we've been reliable on it all over. We've never lived without the support of the background frequency that was building all the structures through us. So when it's gonna be gone, it's a challenge because we cannot prepare for it. We cannot strategically prepare for it. It's not possible to say, okay, I'm gonna buy the earth there because climate change can sweep it, like can just destroy the place you've planned. But the skills of living oneself and that's what we need. We need these tools, and especially if those people who are familiar with rightness and receptiveness. There is so-called rightness and strategic part of our being, and basically rave is this rightness we are heading towards. We are heading from strategic reality into the reality where we cannot, through mind, mentally, and it's obvious now as well, it's starting to be super obvious, we cannot apply mind to our reality because we cannot name sometimes this reality because it's so new. So we cannot predict, strategically plan. So this is where we're going towards. And the only thing that kind of helps us to navigate, to make decisions, is our body, is our unique mechanics. And where this Richard Rudd calls it Homo Sanctus, Raul, who calls it human, oh my God, race, we're Homo sapiens in transitus. So we're this transitional form that kind of on the peak of this evolution where we've actually been heading towards 15 billion years. So we are right at the cherry on a cake. Like it's the cherry of the cherry of the cherry. And what's going to emerge is real raves, which are new children with different solar plexus. With it's like Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals. It's a huge difference, and we're kind of this to bring them. And we're also raves, but we're mixed between strategic and receptive. They're gonna be completely receptive, and the reality we're gonna be completely receptive. That's why pentas, small groups of raves coming together, gonna survive, and that's what we kind of are here to provide. We are here to group those beings together. And yeah, I love how you kind of highlighted the G center, and it all comes back there. It's the self, it's the higher self, and it's about the magnetic monopole. It's about the illusion of being separate and just, moving and watching what's going on. It's not about panicking. It's not about being psychotic. It's not about holding on. It's not about trying to survive. It's about watching and enjoying the illusion while being in the body and while not allowing illusion being our authority. But it's it's an alignment, and it happens through this self, through this G, through this diamond of the self. Thrival, not survival. Those. Yeah. I guess we continue further on the wheel and further in 2027, and so beautifully weaving together. I loved it. Thank you, Alison, and I pass it the last words.
So do we want to have a quick look at the wheel again to finish, just say a little bit about the north and the south hemisphere? I was thinking we could just do that. So we had a bit of feedback from our lovely friend and colleague Madi Berry, who said we'd gone through the wheel and we'd looked at it from the northern hemisphere point of view, where I'm in England, Katrini's in Russia. So, and we were very northist. and so, so this wheel doesn't change in terms of, there's mutation, you know, the different spheres that we go through. But obviously the seasons are different. And I'm born in South Africa, actually. I grew up there. So, so we just thought we'd kind of put the balance right. And it is actually really important for us, wherever we live in the world, to perceive the world holistically, because this is in the Mayan astrology teachings, that each part of the world, east, west, north, south, are actually resonant with the human brain. So when we become holistic, we're kind of thinking about the whole. So if we begin on the Gene Key 1 is where we began last time, didn't we? So this is winter in the Northern Hemisphere, and Katrini was saying like how the ice and the snow for her really captures that yang, that such clean energy. And in the Southern Hemisphere, this is moving into summer. So just kind of recalling back, you know, this is when the sun, which is our yang energy, while it's weakest in the north, it's very powerful in the south. So there's definitely a yang energy for me in that, you know, that kind of quite overwhelming, really, you know. It's such a difference to live in the Northern Hemisphere. Like if I go back to South Africa now, I would just be like roasting, you know, because it's so much cooler in the Northern Hemisphere. And countries like Australia and New Zealand. Yeah, and there's this life everywhere, you know, the birds, the bees, the flowers are growing. So there's this immense kind of life force and outward motion, which is very yang as well, is the outward motion. So in some ways that actually yang reflects that yang outward summer energy, whereas the winter's quite yin, and yet we have that. I do perceive what you say as well, Katrini, that there's this kind of cleanness about the a purity about the winter energy. So do you want to add anything on that bit?
Maybe just to say that, yeah, it's like winter is melancholy time. First one is very mutative, melancholic, and second one actually as well. So summer, winter, melancholic, but in a different ways in different hemispheres. And this is the Earth trigram and the Earth key. So we in Northern Hemisphere, we tend to think that it's a summer solstice. We plant seeds and we reap seeds during the autumn, and then we rest and we contemplate during the winter, and we kind of wake up in spring here. But in the southern, it's this flips and it's kind of mirrors, and we are indeed polarized. And I like how you said that there is this, we need to hold it together, this seasons that are different and flipped. Like here it's a spring equinox in the southern hemisphere and autumn equinox. So we kind of really like black and white in a way. We're doing different things in different seasons, though they're programmatically speaking they're the same. That's why we're also so different. We have different cultures, different mythologies completely. They sometimes like almost opposite, and it's only homogenized world that makes Australians to have a new year during the northern hemisphere winter time. So we still kind of 31st December, everyone celebrates New Year, though in Australia it's summertime. So it's quite fun how the program's still kind of trying to squeeze it towards the northern hemisphere in a way. Yeah, that would be my put.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm remembering about like Christmas in South Africa. It's like the middle of summer, it's like the peak of summer, but you'd still get all these cards and TV programs about the winter because there's Santa Claus is set in the and Christmas is set in the winter. So there was always like this kind of strange like dissonance, you know. And I always remember my brother cooking like a huge turkey in his barbecue outside. Everyone's like in their costumes, drinking beer. You know? So yeah, Southern Hemisphere Christmas, and then you know the cards up are all you know of Santa in the snow and robins in the snow and all that. Yeah.
I have an epiphany I want to share pretty quickly. It's like you've mentioned this polarization, and I've mentioned the homogenization, and I feel, and there's many narratives that Mayo, I forgot this name's guy who is like a storyteller, as well as Charles Eisenstein. They're talking about diversity. They're talking about that we need to include all the diversity. And the first step for me is to polarize back. It's like, okay, Southern Africa, you celebrate your own cultural things, your roots, not the Santa Claus. It's about we have to polarize to really integrate. Otherwise, it's a mishmash. So we polarize back and we integrate all of the diversity. And but there needs to be poles, there needs to be differences, there needs to be diversity of cultures. And this is really hard because we are all kind of in this mutation into this survival and building same structures. And I feel like storytelling and talking about things like we're doing now as well is about including and inclusion. And yes, thank you, Midi, to kind of pointing this out, because we are in this northern mind dominative, and we are not here about domination, we're about equilibrium, polarized, integrating complexities. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, actually, one thing that I kind of had my own epiphany last week, because I noticed that Hopi was in Gene Key 33, line 5, another one of these trans-Neptunian objects. And while I'd been away last week, I'd actually created 2 sets of Hopi art on the beach, both which I'd used stones, black, white, red and yellow, representing the 4 races as well, and bringing them into unity. Yeah, so it's quite interesting, you know, that kind of assumed white domination, which connects to, in the Hopi system, connects to the mind, is the white race. And so as the mind becomes less and less prevalent, I think we are going to naturally see things moving back more into balance. And you know, indigenous wisdom, I feel, is really important from all parts of the globe at this time. And I just wanted to say as well, from a shamanistic point of view, in the north we have the Great Bear, we have you know, the Northern Star is our still point in the heavens, and in the Southern Hemisphere it's the Southern Cross that is that still point. So these are really important points in the shamanic traditions, where you know, what you'd find actually is in the Southern Hemisphere, the cultures would say that the Southern Cross, for example, would be a really, really important point, because it's a still point. everyone's focused on it the same way we do with the North Star in the Northern Hemisphere. So this is going to bring about a different consciousness, because there's different stars involved, and different mythologies that arise from our relationship with the stars. Okay, so yeah, so as in the north we're going into spring, in the southern hemisphere going into autumn, which is interesting, you know, because in autumn we're entering a relationship sphere on this side of the wheel, and I've always thought of the autumn leaves like dissolving as being a really good metaphor for relationships. So what about the spring equinox and relationships? Well, the spring equinox is full of fertility, you know, that it's full of that kind of reproductive energy. So I could see also in that that spring energy that you would still have that relationship kind of realm really strong on. Yeah, I've kind of swapped sides now. I'm talking about as we enter the relating duality part of the chart where Katrini's pointing out there. Yeah, so yeah, another thing to kind of think about, I've not actually been to any sacred sites that align to the solstices in the southern hemisphere, but certainly in the northern hemisphere in Wales, where we go, you have an alignment with both the summer and the winter solstice, but they obviously come in at different directions. So, you know, winter solstice, the one we go to, the sun will come in through a triangle there, and then we'll go down the tunnel that you walk in, and then at summer solstice it'll come up the tunnel and go out through this triangle shape. So you know, so there's an alignment of sacred sites that you would find would differ perhaps as well in the southern hemisphere. Yeah, so there's all sorts of interesting things to consider, but I think when you go into it, you can find like a resonance with each part of the wheel that makes sense to me anyway. But I've kind of been in the northern hemisphere since I was 18. So I spent more time here, and I was also like not an adult thinking about these kind of things. So it's really interesting to actually, you know, think back to my childhood and how the different energies were there. And like countries like South Africa, and I'm sure this is the case with many countries, but it has like 3 different weather systems, like subtropical, tropical, well actually 4, temperate and Mediterranean. So within those different weather systems, you're also going to experience summer and winter really differently, because, you know, in subtropical and tropical, you don't really get a seasonal change in the same marked way you do certainly in the northern hemisphere. It's much, you know, you get the trees all changing their colours and the leaves falling off. Well, you didn't really get that in South Africa, from my memory anyway. So, you know, the seasons kind of came and went, and they weren't as pronounced, I don't think, apart from a drop in temperature and a change in how much light you have. You know, there wasn't as much change in the plant kingdom. So yeah, so to say, I'm going to end there. I'm going to say thank you again to Midi for getting us balanced. And yeah, and so in our next one, we're going to look again at the wheel. I'll let Katrini actually explain, but we're going to be talking about Gene Key 59. And just before I came on, I actually found this heron feather, which is the totem animal for Gene Key 59. So I'll hand over to you, and thank you everyone. Namaste. Please share this with your friends and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and get in touch with myself and Katrini. Our details will be posted below. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, us, and those who are watching. Let's move on the wheel.